Hi.
Hello there.
Franz has been talking about house fellowships, and so we're going to carry on in the chapter A Congregation of Free People on 676, page 676. Since they themselves formed a spiritual dwelling place for God, they had no need of special buildings for worship, nor did God's dwelling in them limit itself to certain times on certain days. As archaeological evidence shows, homes at the time rarely had a room capable of holding more than about 40 persons. Boy, we could wish for that today. Okay. The gatherings, therefore, were relatively small. Such home gatherings provided a context in which the sense of a family-like relationship could develop, for these provided an atmosphere conducive to the expression of the bonds that joined them in a brotherhood, and favorable for that sense of brotherhood to grow and to deepen. They could more readily come to know one another better, become more aware of mutual needs, interests, and concerns.
This picture of a congregation may be quite different from the prevailing viewpoint of most persons today, certainly different from what most are accustomed to, yet it embraces what is perhaps an even more fundamental aspect of Christianity and of the essential meaning of the word congregation or church, ecclesia in Christian terms. Pointing to this, well-known Swiss scholar Emil Brunner writes, quote, "Where the word of God is preached and believed, where 2 or 3 meet in the name of Christ, there is the church. Whatever else may be said about the church, this is fundamental. This statement has never, not even at the present day, been understood in all its revolutionary power. The meeting of 2 or 3 must be recognized to be the church in however imperfect a form. When a father gathers his household round him to expound the gospel to them in his humble, simple way, or where a layman, out of a full heart, proclaims the word of God to a group of young people, there is the church. Whoever departs from this rule, whoever thinks that something else has to be added to make this a real church, has misunderstood the meaning, the very heart of the evangelical faith." End of Brunner's quote.
Most today do feel that something else has to be added. The very simplicity of the matter goes contrary to their concept of a congregation. Religions generally seek to superimpose the idea of organization or denomination with an accompanying authority structure as necessary to validate any gatherings as real Christian congregation. The scriptural message does not support them. Christ's promise does not support them. The gathering of 2 or 3 need not be all that one would wish, nor should it deaden the impelling force to reach out to yet others. But it is sufficient for Christ's words to apply. I am there among you, among them. The addition of 100 or 1,000 persons to the 2 or 3, the transferal of the gathering place to some large building, or the presence of a dozen or more men viewed as organizationally appointed office holders would not add one whit to the realness of this being a Christian gathering or congregation. The presence of God's Son, the head of the congregation, is the sole validation needed.
Well, as we said with the prior section, Robert Banks is cited as a scholar, but he's also a clergyman, and here Emil Brunner is cited as a Swiss scholar, but he also is a clergyman, an ordained clergyman of the Reformed faith in Europe, and as such believes in both and, not either or. So we're not forced to make a choice, because the great churches of Europe and the rest of the world as well believe in both if they're really good and solid churches.
I mean, these are quotes from men who belong to a larger format,
Anglican,
but encourage
Reformed.
a small format as well.
Yeah. So this message was in these guys long before Ray picks up the thought, or even Brunner's thought, long before Robert Banks picks up the thought. this thought has been there from the beginning, and there are denominations that are fairly simple, and there are denominations that go right quite big. But I would say in Brunner's favor and Banks, they're part of very large denominations, and there's some things that denominations can do that house fellowships can't do.
Yeah. These men taught at, well, at least Brunner, I don't know about Banks, but they taught at institutions, they taught at universities and
Seminaries created by
Right.
denominations
yeah. So, and they publish books.
that can only be published by large structures.
So you can see the value of both to the church, to the building up of the church.
And I would say they're in continuity with the New Testament, i.e. the New Testament believers. We forget their Jewishness. They were used to weekly synagogue meetings, sometimes twice or three times weekly synagogue meetings,
And regular festivals attached to their Jewish
thrice a year.
traditions, yeah.
And also the new moon, we forget that one. They had a monthly festival. So they got together in big groups very regularly.
Yeah.
And small groups, of course, in their local villages very regularly. And in the case of their families, probably taught their children daily. And so that pattern you can see in the early church. It was far more intense than even Jewish worship.
So when they
Forms.
got together in these house fellowships too, I think we might have the impression that it was only for the purpose of them to get really close to each other in
Intimacy.
Yeah, to be like a family, to be in fellowship together, you know. So we sometimes have gatherings of a smaller group, and it does feel more family-like. But if it's a gathering of Christians for the purpose of furthering their faith, it's not just about a potluck or just let's get
Casual.
together and hug each other. It's for the purpose of learning more, to digging deeper, and that is easier with a smaller group too, to go a little deeper in the Word and discuss it and
But
hear
without-
everybody.
But without larger structures, how do you do the disciplining as
Yeah.
well as the community reading, where everybody has to go? They have to go because they have to hear the Word of God.
And they hear that at the synagogues where they had the scrolls.
That's what they were used to. So one of the links we want to put on your screen is on the Matthew 18 saying that Ray is using here as his basis for this discussion, and so is Emil Brunner, i.e. wherever two or three are gathered in my name. That's Matthew 18. But in the context, that's about discipline within the church. It's not. It's about agreeing to discipline.
Yeah.
Rather, and it assumes, if you go back further in Matthew 18, there is a congregation, because it's one of two times that Christ actually uses the word ecclesia.
Yeah, so he
In the
says,
Gospel.
take it to the congregation. Any kind of disciplinary thing, if it can't be handled personally between two people, two or three people, then you're supposed to take it to the whole congregation.
Yeah, there's a higher accountability. So we'll put that link on your screen now. And next time Ray is talking about getting together to encourage to love and good deeds. And there he's referencing, among others, the famous Watchtower proof text, don't forsake the gathering of yourselves together.
Hebrews.